I have always been fascinated by the ocean. Throughout this expedition, our divers have shared the sea with extraordinary but often little-known fish, corals, plants, and animals. But for me, the most mythical and deeply touching inhabitants of the deep are whales.
The team has headed to the Silver Bank off the coast of the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean Sea. Every year in winter, humpback whales return to this protected shoal to breed and give birth.
It's a magnificent place where one can slip into the whale's environment and share their world. There are few places on the planet like this where we can draw back the curtain on their lives. By spending time with these whales, we can better understand them and ultimately better protect them.
There are few places where humans can share the underwater world of the last giants on Earth. But access to the Silver Bank Sanctuary is strictly controlled. Only 3 boats have permits to observe humpback whales during the breeding and calving season. The crew has left the Sedna IV to join the Sundancer, a ship that has plied these waters for many years. It takes about 12 hours to reach the sanctuary. For this expedition, 2 leading experts on whales have joined mission leader Jean Lemire. Richard Sears, who travels the world to study whales, and Sal Sergio, who began his career as a biologist on Silver Bank. After nearly 30 years, Sal and Richard are back on Silver Bank with the same passion and desire to study whales.
The idea of coming here back then was to gather all the scientists from the Northeast who were working on humpback whales, from the St. Lawrence to Newfoundland and Labrador to New England, together on Silver Bank. When I found out about it, I was naturally thrilled to take part and come observe where these whales go in the winter. It was the first time that we really focused on photo identification of humpback flukes to find out where all the whales on Silver Bank were coming from.
I was here 28 years ago, and when the opportunity to come back to Silver Bank arose, there was no way I could resist. On that trip, it just so happened that there were several major scientists that were currently doing work with humpback whales. So I got quite lucky to be involved in a project of that level. And I was on the breeding grounds of humpback whales in the North Atlantic, one of the most densest aggregations on the planet.
Scientists like to go where the whales are abundant. Doing research far at sea is extremely difficult, so where there are a lot of whales, you'll often find an abundance of scientists too.
Jean and Richard are old research colleagues. From the Sea of Cortez to Iceland to the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada, they have worked together to photograph different species of whales around the world. Photography is the basis of whale research. Patterns of skin pigmentation are unique to each animal, which allows them to be recognized and told apart. This is essential to studying their behavior.
This is an example of a humpback photo ID. It's like a fingerprint. They are kind enough to lift their fluke when they dive, and the pattern on the underside of the tail is unique for each animal. It can vary from completely black to completely white.
Totalement noir à totalement blanc. We
learn about the species by studying individuals, and there are now huge photo ID catalogs of humpback populations around the world. Now that the catalogs have been digitized, when we get to a place where someone has taken pictures of humpbacks, we can attempt to find a match and identify the individual using a simple computer or even an iPad.
Photo identification has helped pinpoint the main gathering sites of humpbacks around the world. The discovery of Silver Bank, the humpback's main breeding site in the Atlantic, is a result of this collaboration between different research teams. In the Pacific, humpbacks gather around the Hawaiian Islands in winter to breed and give birth.
When I was much younger, I had the privilege of working in Hawaii for several winters. I had a scientific permit to swim with the whales and study their behavior during the breeding season. It was fascinating work. This underwater world is so foreign to us. We know so little about it, but we think that the whale's reproductive strategy revolves around the females. Males are often aggressive toward each other, and we sometimes witness intense combats to win the favors of a female. The male closest to the female is called the escort. He is constantly confronted by other males called challengers. They want to get close to the female to mate with her. This can lead to violent combats. But this is all hypothesis. No one has ever witnessed humpback whales mating. The same goes for calving. We do not yet have convincing visual proof. I remember one day I filmed the erect penis of a male approaching a female. The footage has become popular because it's not something you see every day. But spectacular as it was, it didn't prove a thing. It's all hypothesis. There are clues, but in science, you need irrefutable proof. There were situations where we were surrounded by 10 or 15 males fighting amongst each other, and it was tense at times. But they are among the most memorable moments of my career. In recent decades, scientists have made their most important scientific discoveries about whales at winter gathering areas like the Dominican Republic.
The seasonal gatherings of humpbacks on breeding grounds give scientists a chance to accumulate a large amount of data on the various subpopulations.
It's marvelous to monitor a group over a long distance on Silver Bank. I couldn't have imagined it any better when Jean spoke to me about returning here. It's amazing to watch this group of active males on the surface.
That's a baby breed.
The clear water at Silver Bank lets scientists share the whale's underwater world. This protected shoal is shallow, making it easier to observe and study whale behavior throughout the water column. Mothers and calves are much calmer than males, who often engage in combat. They don't move around much, allowing biologists to observe the interactions between mother and calf.
Wow. Yeah, did you see the way the calf was let go by the mother?
Yeah.
Just came right up to the surface. She stayed down there, and then she came up. It was amazing.
Calves are often reckless. In a spirit of mutual curiosity, the mother allows the scientists and her offspring to interact.
Mother came out kind of unexpectedly too, and I didn't know where to go.
You're not scared. These are what I call little moments of eternity. They get etched into your memory forever.
It was fantastic. I've never had an experience like that before.
Amazing. Amazing.
What's going on? How we doing?
I wish I had the car like. She just came up and breezed through there without touching any of us.
I would have touched her pectorals and I would have had it.
Yeah.
Right there.
You would have touched what?
The mother allowed her curious calf to approach us. It was no more than 3 months old. The mother was calm and watchful. If the calf came too close, she would just come over and turn. And we were sort of trapped between the calf and the mother. Daniela wound up right over the mother's back, but she didn't move. And it was the mother who moved off. Not far, maybe 100 feet, and then returned to the bottom. The calf moved under the mother. Really, it was the perfect situation.
In our experience working in Mexico, the whales aren't as curious and they're not as tolerant. So we can approach them in the boat, but they don't come over and check us out and go under the boat and look at us and approach us more in the water. That was completely new.
Yeah. No, it was fantastic. I mean, and also it was so long. I mean, sometimes you get in with whales and you get a nice gift for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but this went on for hours. And we'd get out, and this time we were able to stay in a good long amount of time. It's been a really nice moments.
Incredible. With encounters like that, you can die happy tomorrow. Incredible. It's the very end of the season, so there are a lot of very active males in large groups. We want to study the relationship between the escort and the challengers. The escort is the male closest to the female, and all the other males fight to get as close to the female as possible. Amidst all this action are a few isolated males who decide to sing. We'll put the hydrophone in the water and hear many singers because the songs carry well in the water. But the hard part is isolating one. It's challenging, but we probably have the best people on board for it, so with a bit of luck, we'll be successful.
Right now we're searching for a singer. It's kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack. And what we want to do is keep moving, listening each time we move to look for a single individual singer to get louder and louder. And once it gets louder from one stop to another, we know we're moving in the right direction, and then we can start to look for him on the surface.
Finding a lone male singer among groups of humpback whales is a real challenge. Scientists must identify certain parts of the song, long, prolonged growls, that mean the male is about to surface. They then scan the horizon for the whale's spout on the surface and try to approach the male slowly to avoid any kind of disturbance.
When you find your singer, you're ecstatic. When you slip into the water with him, the song is so powerful that your internal organs vibrate. It's hard to describe. It's simply extraordinary. Just like human songs, humpback whale songs are organized into verses and refrains. The song changes over the course of a year, but the amazing thing is that at some point, all the males end up singing the same song. We don't understand exactly how this happens, but it's extraordinary. And what's even more incredible, listen to what happens if we speed up the song. Here, we've sped it up 14 times. Listen. It's very much like the structure of bird song in its complexity. It's just that humpback whales sing very, very slowly. It's fascinating.
Song in the humpback whale is a major part of a breeding system and the role it plays in the breeding system. So it attracts a lot of attention because of the emotional attachment that people have with song. And that's both on the level of what we as humans come to, what song is all about. Song is an incredible aspect of every single culture. It's a very important aspect of every single culture on the planet.
This song changes throughout the breeding season. In spring, when the whales begin their long migration north, the males stop singing. The singing of males is often associated with courtship, a sort of seductive serenade to attract females. But this is just a theory. Despite significant advances in the understanding of whale behavior, the exact function of the humpback song remains a mystery.
At any given time, all males in a group sing essentially the same or very similar songs. they change the song over time. It's a gradual and progressive change. And all whales within a group change their song in the same ways. So they're learning from each other. And the last remarkable aspect of it is that within an ocean basin, animals that have contact at some point in time are sharing those songs and sharing those changes and changing in the same way.
Scientists still do not understand how males share the same song. They also wonder how the song is transmitted over long distances, well beyond the hearing range of a single group gathered in the same area. But beyond science, the incredible emotion produced when you experience this unique phenomenon is perhaps its greatest mystery. With the arrival of spring begins the long migration north. After fasting during the breeding season, it is time for the whales to head to the rich waters of the northern latitudes. Photo identification and satellite tags have identified different feeding sites in the Atlantic, ranging from the coast of New England up to Iceland and even Norway. In the Pacific, humpback whales migrate too. They leave the breeding area of Hawaii and head to Alaska to feed. Some whales in this area of the Pacific have developed a truly special feeding technique. Rather than feed alone, some humpbacks form groups to capture their prey, the herring that school in the rich waters of Alaska in summer. These whales have developed a shrill feeding call, which they use to synchronize their assault on schools of fish. They also use bubbles expelled from their blowholes to create a sort of net. The feeding call frightens the herring, while the bubble net herds them together. The work of biologist Fred Sharp has helped to understand this truly unique fishing technique, one used only by a small number of humpback whales.
I worked with Fred Sharp here in Alaska a long time ago. I think it was 1996. We were trying to film everything on the surface to understand what was going on. At the same time, we had hydrophones in the water to try to understand who was doing what in the groups. Later, this work formed the basis for many well-known studies.
I arrived in Alaska in 1987, and I came up as a naturalist and saw my first bubble net and never looked back. I guess the most important thing I've learned about these humpback whales is that they're all incredible individuals. Each one seems to have its own story. It's a story that may last up to a century. They have their own ways of feeding. They have their own friends, their own places they call home. And that's been the most wonderful part, is just learning the tremendous lives of these whales. The humpback whale in southeast Alaska is truly one of our most abundant and amazing backyard predators. Almost all of them are from Polynesia, the Hawaiian Islands. And they come up here in May, and they'll spend 6 to 8 months feeding on herring and krill. And then around Christmas time, they head back to the islands of Hawaii and complete their amazing life cycle.
Right there,
Okay.
right there.
Hold this position.
Captain, should we move a little bit to have the photo ID of this one?
That's just phenomenal.
He's gonna die.
There he goes.
Great.
The idea is to be as perpendicular to the fluke as possible. Each fluke has a distinctive pigmentation pattern that allows us to photo ID the animals. It is important to be able to identify individual whales, because if we want to study their behavior, we have to be able to tell the individuals apart. All body marks are important, so we try to take a lateral photograph of the dorsal fin and then one of the fluke. That way, we can be sure that we get the ID right. And if we're ever in shallow water and the whales don't show their tails, we also have the dorsal fin as a reference.
How many animals do you have in your catalog?
About 1,000.
1,000?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, pretty big. Jan's got about 2,000, and the park, there's probably about 3,000, 3,500 animals for the northern southeast Alaska. A few Guadalajarans come up, a few Mexicans, a few Asiatics show up once in a while, but...
Mainly Hawaii?
Yeah, almost all Hawaiian. Bubbles.
Bubble, right
here. See that nice softball side?
Yeah.
And the classic. Now, those are the ones that really scare the fish the most. Bigger, faster, they reflect more light, they make a lot more noise. Those are the real workhorse of the bubble net. And it looks like this one, and it looks like it might be going in a counterclockwise circle. That's kind of interesting. About 90% of the animals blow in a clockwise circle.
Oh, yeah.
And it's remarkable in that it's the same level of handedness or laterality that humans have. So it's another striking similarity between humpback whales and humans.
Here we are, barren off, warm spring. So what's the plan, Fred?
Well, I figure we're gonna have a lot of fog this morning, so what do you think, Cap? You feel comfortable navigating in these fogs?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is not a problem. It's supposed to burn off by midday. And it's actually, I think it already is starting to burn off a little bit.
So I figure good time for running north, and hopefully things will burn off by the time we get up to the confluence of Peril Strait and Chatham. And that's why we probably got 3-4 hours to get up there.
When we arrived by plane, we saw, good group of whales around Parker Point.
Right.
So, it's close to Boone. So.
Yeah. Typically, there's a lot of herring schools still in this area at this time of the year, and it's been kind of an unusual year. Seems like the herring have sort of picked up and moved out of Dodge, and so in some ways we're looking for the prey as much as we are the whales.
We have the weather on our side, so let's
Yeah,
move.
we do. The humpbacks feed in a remarkable variety of ways. And the krill, these small shrimp-like crustaceans, they're quite easy for the whales to catch, and so most of the time when they're feeding on the krill, they can do it alone. Typically they hunt the krill by just swimming up to a school and opening their mouth and engulfing them. They'll laterally lunge, they'll roll to the surface, they will lunge up through them, but they will use a whole variety of techniques.
Amazing. There's whales everywhere. Everywhere.
Hey, he's yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was great.
Amazing.
So that's your friend.
Beautiful animal. It's funny that he is so friendly. Did you see on his tail where he had ropes? He'd been in nets before.
Yeah.
He has been insulted by humanity, but yet he comes over to to be curious and interactive. It's amazing. It's almost like forgiveness.
Yeah, it's wow.
On such a beautiful evening, too.
Yeah, perfect.
There's his footprint.
Yeah.
What do you suppose? He just curious? He just
curious.
Just
yeah.
wanted to know who we are and what's up.
Yeah.
And
Alors, on est vraiment avec
We are with a
baleine
very
curieuse,
curious
une baleine
whale,
qui
one that keeps passing right under our boat.
sur le bateau. Et ce qui est fantastique,
And what's amazing is that it comes very close and then turns slightly to look at us. It's done this 3 or 4 times.
3-4 fois qu'elle le fait. And see, again, instead of chasing the whale,
yeah.
you just wait
Yeah.
and you're a target.
That's right. Couldn't have said it better, Massan. Couldn't have said it better.
Going under.
Hello, hello. Thanks for coming back.
It's gonna be near you, Captain.
Thanks for the fluke ID. Nice. Amazing.
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 Yeah, coming right here, right here. Woo-hoo! Look on the side.
He's rolling over.
Rolling. Wow.
Yeah.
Ils savent tellement ce
They know exactly what they're
qu'ils
doing.
bateau, ils viennent.
They swim around the boat and turn to look at us. This one rolled right on its side to really get a good look at us.
Qui on est. C'est très difficile.
It's hard to know why they do it, but one thing is sure. It's very much a conscious act.
De façon consciente. C'est
You know, I've just been so incredibly curious about them for, a quarter of a century, and it's nice to finally think they want to know a little bit about us. It's really touching, and it's really, it's kind of a gift.
Yeah.
And they share so many similarities with humans. Their brain is gigantic, and it's laced with spindle neurons, and in humans, those are associated with language acquisition, social intelligence, and compassion. And we see a lot of compassionate acts with humpback whales, the way they'll protect their young if there's predators around, and they'll come to each other's aid, and just general interspecies interest. It's a sense of higher cognitive function.
Yeah.
The weather has taken a turn for the worse, so it will be harder to work now. Today we hope that the whales we saw yesterday, individually using bubbles to feed down deep, will come together at the surface, so we can observe them using this technique as a group when the attacks are synchronized with song. It's truly spectacular.
Calling the Washington State Ferry Fairweather. This is the Wayfinder. Do you copy 1-6?
This is the State Ferry Fairweather, WDB 5604, back to the call.
Okay, Fairweather. We kindly wanted to inquire about any number of cetaceans, particularly humpback whales, that you might have seen in your journey through Peril Strait. Over.
At 11:03, we saw them bubble net feeding just inside between Pavarotti and Light 22. And at 14:30, we spotted a couple of whales, but there wasn't a lot of bird activity, and we didn't see any bubble feeding on our way, this direction.
Well, thank you so much, and kindly, if you, in your further journeys, come across any more significant numbers of bubble net feeding humpback whales, we'd really appreciate to hear from you.
Roger.
The people of Alaska know whales and their behavior. This is an asset for Fred Sharp, who must travel great distances to find the whales that use this particular feeding technique. The observations received from the ferry now guide the boat to a small, isolated inlet.
These whales are hungry, and They're looking for food. They're cruising the strip. They're looking to mix it up. They need about half a ton of food a day. And humpbacks have this large trick-or-treat bag made out of spandex on their tummy. And they feed by engulfing big chunks out of the ecosystem every time they feed.
It's almost night. They normally, slow down at this time of the day, right?
Well, this is very typical. About this time of the evening, the whales, the rate with which they're feeding slows down. They seem to lose the beat on the herring. The fish are more scattered out, and they move out to mid-channel where they can get their sea room and have plenty of space, ocean moorage, and they go to sleep. And they get a good night's sleep, so they're ready to get at it in the morning.
Before night sets in, Fred and Jean have photo ID'd a small group of feeding whales. This is standard procedure, almost a reflex for researchers who use cameras as a primary research tool. But that night, an examination of the photographs reveals something unexpected. A wonderful surprise that also demonstrates the effectiveness of photo identification. An old friend has reappeared.
I think that might be Trumpeter.
Yeah, we found him. And great news, if it's Trumpeter, I mean, we know that's a good leader.
Yeah.
Very good leader.
Trumpeter and Jan are big old friends.
Yes.
They go way back.
Oh, yeah.
Remember back in 1996?
Yeah.
Here's our friend Trumpeter.
Yeah.
And you can compare it to what we obtained on this voyage. And what do you think?
Yeah, that's a match. Look, that little thing here. Same pigmentation pattern.
Nice serrated trailing edge. And here's why we call him Trumpeter. The most amazing sounds. Makes the most brilliant low. It starts out with this nice low, steady, and then he just goes off the scale. It's like you were saying, Miles Davis.
Nice.
In the morning, Trumpeter, the humpback whale first identified in 1996, was waiting for them.
Nice. Trumpeter again. Yep, you were right.
That's him, eh?
Yeah, that's amazing. God, it's like...
In 96, Trumpeter was leading a big group, and he was really, active, and he was the one who was starting the feeding call, doing the bubbles and everything, and always going very high compared to the other, right in the middle.
You know, he disappeared from the database for like 7 years, and we thought he'd gone to the great bubble net in the sky, but he's back and leading Team Bubble Net. That should be plenty deep. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, nice and loud. The feeding calls that the humpbacks produce appear to be unique here in Southeast Alaska. Everywhere you go, it seems like they have their special nuances, but here in Alaska, we're richly rewarded by these loud, beautiful feeding calls, larger groups with more stable, enduring friendships. Oh, nice feeding call. Clear, pure. I mean, it hurts my ears. I sit in the lab and listen to this hour after hour, and it's like, after a while, it's like, this is crazy.
Do they start the feeding call first and the bubble after, or?
Seems to be a lot of variation there. Yeah, a lot of individual style, but typically we'll hear the bubbles and the feeding call start about the same time. Oh, now you can hear the bubbles coming up. You hear that? Deploying the bubble net, percolating it out of the blowhole as far as we know.
These Alaskan whales have developed a unique feeding technique in which whales cooperate to capture prey. After more than 15 years, scientists have concluded that trumpeter is still a leader among the whales, often sounding the charge and commanding the troops.
Those sounds that you're hearing, those are the whales diving below the herring schools and producing these incredibly loud, annoying sounds. It's almost like turning a fire alarm on a building and all you want to do is run for the exits. Well, that's what the whales are doing. And one whale going in usually a clockwise fashion, and the bubbles rise up and effervesce and create this amazing corral. It's almost like a rocket tube that the whales then come shooting up and engulf the prey at the surface. The increase of humpback whales, both here in the Pacific and throughout the world, is one of the best conservation success stories. And it's remarkable to see how humans can, exhibit concern for the environment and then show some conservation wisdom. And we're richly rewarded to see the humpbacks returning to all these waters. I don't think we'll ever start hunting the humpback whales in a large manner again. I think they're just too beloved and too many people care about them. And I think there's many other concerns, climate change, ocean acidification, pollution, acoustic sounds bothering them. There's many, many concerns, but I don't think the harpoon is one of them.
The complexity of whale song is an exquisite example of how nature and evolution have shaped living things to exist in balance with their environment. It took millions of years to create this balance, so more than ever, it's vital that we do everything we can to protect the living heritage of our planet, so that whale song can go on delighting our children and our children's children.
The extraordinary diversity of life on Earth is the result of a fragile balance that dictates the fundamental laws of life and allows different forms of life to interact, grow, and reproduce. The culmination of eons of evolution, life expresses itself in a colorful canvas that gives the Earth its unique character. Our own survival depends on this biodiversity, from the tiniest life forms to the very largest. The first forms of life arose in the oceans about 3.8 billion years ago. Today, they still support an array of fragile ecosystems that continue to astonish us as we learn more about them. But our planet's biodiversity is threatened. Today, plant and animal species are disappearing at an accelerated rate, probably unequaled in Earth's history. We must regain a balance between all species if we want to preserve the ecosystem services that nature provides. These services are what allow our own species to exist. Oceans cover over 70% of the Earth's surface. They represent 300 times more inhabitable volume than all of Earth's land habitats. It is estimated that more than 2 million species live in the oceans, about a quarter of all living species. Over 90% have yet to be documented by science. For scientists, unraveling the ocean's mysteries is a formidable challenge. Jean Lemire, mission leader of the oceanographic schooner Sedna IV.
Our mission, 1,000 Days for the Planet, is in the spirit of the great explorers of yesteryears. With scientists, we are traveling the world's ocean to better understand the conservation challenges that we all face. And there are many, many challenges, because the ocean still bears the scars of our past abuses.
The history of our exploitation of the oceans is not a glorious one. In order to supply European lanterns with oil, the great whales were hunted to the brink of extinction. We are still living with the consequences of this carnage today. Many species are still on the endangered list. Fin whales, blue whales, minke whales, right whales, and dozens of other species are struggling to recover from our bloody past. Despite the fragile moratorium that now protects most species, some countries still hunt whales in the name of science or of culture.
That is ridiculous because we don't need to take the whales for science, in quotes, especially if you use the subproduct of that science to sell it in the market.
Scientific whaling, overexploitation of ocean resources, illegal fishing. The pressure we place on the oceans has become unsustainable, and these already considerable conservation challenges have been complicated by even more insidious problems, such as plastic pollution.
The gyre, where a lot of it concentrates, some people say it's the size of Texas or even twice the size of Texas. So we're talking incredible amounts of items out there and debris.
The oceans have always supported life, but if that life is today being threatened, is it not time to rethink our relationship with the ocean's inhabitants? Of all the great oceanic migrants, whales are without question one of the most emblematic symbols of conservation. The Sedna has stopped in the Azores. The rich Atlantic waters here attract 24 species of cetacean. Though they have a long history of whale hunting, the Azorians gave up this tradition in the late 1980s. Richard Sears has studied whales for over 30 years. Every spring, the great diversity of species off the Azores lures him here to study the migratory patterns of large Atlantic whales. But it's not an easy task. Following these great migrating nomads of the oceans is a challenge for scientists.
OK, donc, on se met une heure de départ à 13h, 13h30, heure locale. Richard travels the world to photograph different species. He introduced me to the fascinating world of whales. We often work together, and I have traveled with him to different oceans, always with the same passion, the same desire to learn more about them.
Scientists are a bit like the hunters of yesterday. In modern science, the camera has replaced the harpoon. The quest is the same, but the goal has changed. Today, we have a real desire to protect whales. These species are slowly recovering from the excessive commercial whaling that forever changed the face of our oceans. Among the victims of commercial whale hunting, the right whale. A symbol of our past abuses, the right whale is a coastal species, slow and easy to approach, and was a preferred target of the harpoon. In less than 70 years in the 19th century, North American whalers killed over 190,000 right whales in the North Atlantic. Hunting right whales was banned in 1935, but the damage was done. At that time, the population was estimated at fewer than 100 individuals in the entire North Atlantic. Today, after over 3/4 of a century of protection, only about 350 representatives of this severely threatened species remain. As hunting techniques improved, whalers were able to go after fast-swimming, ocean-going species like the blue whale, the largest animal on the planet. Up to 30 meters in length, and over 100 tons of power and grace. Before commercial hunting, the worldwide population of blue whales was estimated at over 350,000 individuals. Over the past century, nearly 99% of this population was slaughtered. Richard Sears is an expert on blue whales. He has developed a photo ID technique so that scientists can now identify and monitor the movements of this species, which is still threatened with extinction.
The pigmentation pattern on the sides of blue whales allows us to reliably identify individuals. We have identified about 325 blue whales in the North Atlantic, including many photos taken in the Azores. We have many partners here who take good pictures that allow us to match photos from year to year. In this case, Johanna, who works here in Horta, photographed this whale in 2002, and the animal returned in 2010. That's a long time between matches. I think it's the longest match we've had here in the Azores.
For over 30 years, Richard Sears has compiled photographs of blue whales. His catalog includes several hundred individuals in the North Atlantic, but their migration routes remain completely shrouded in mystery. The humpback whale was also hunted all over the world. It is estimated that in the mid-19th century, the worldwide population of humpbacks was over 125,000 individuals. In less than 100 years, nearly 95% of the population was wiped out by whalers. By the mid-1960s, only a few thousand survivors remained. In the 1980s, a broad scientific effort led to a series of techniques that today form the basis of our knowledge about this species. Among these techniques is the identification of individuals using photographs of the tail flukes.
Here's an example of photo identification of a humpback whale. It's the equivalent of a fingerprint for this species. They are kind enough to raise their fluke when they dive, and the pattern on the underside of the tail is different for each individual. It can vary from totally black to totally white. Studying individuals helps us learn about the species, and now we have extensive catalogs of humpbacks all over the planet. All this data makes it a powerful system because it allows us to learn about the movements of these animals, their migrations, their numbers, and newcomers to the population.
This technique led to the discovery of gathering sites for the species in the North Atlantic. These feeding areas are frequented by different humpback whale populations from spring to fall. Scientific research has shown that populations are faithful to these gathering sites. A humpback whale that frequents coastal waters in a particular area will generally return to the same place the following season. Every winter, most North Atlantic humpbacks migrate south to Silverbank off the coast of the Dominican Republic. They gather on this protected shallow area to mate and give birth. But scientists only discovered the importance of Silverbank in the 1980s.
84, it was my first time I saw a whale. We didn't know even where was located Silverbank. We heard about it, but we didn't know. The density of Silverbank, if it's not the highest, it could be one of the highest of the world.
Nowadays, everything we know about the animal's movements between here and the north seems obvious. But back then, we knew very little, almost nothing. We knew they came here, but it had never been studied in depth. So we came, and we made a great many photo IDs. Each of us recognized animals from the different areas we were working in.
Over 30 years after the discovery of Silverbank, scientists are back. They are now trying to determine the migration routes used by humpback whales between Silverbank and their different feeding areas. For biologist Amy Kennedy, this is a chance to deploy satellite transmitters.
Smallest guy, that one.
It's the end of the season, so there are lots of males in large groups who are very active. There's a struggle between the escort and what we call the challengers. The escort is the male closest to the female, and all the other males fight to be as close to the female as possible.
Before installing the satellite beacons, the scientists try to identify the sex of the animals. They use a crossbow that shoots an arrow with a hollow tip to take a sample of the animal's skin and blubber. Using genetic profiles, scientists can determine the kinship among the different individuals.
So we have developed also a large database of whale tissue. Besides the samples that were taken for DNA studies, we also developed the archive. So it's a genetical catalog. We have whales identified genetically, and this, together with their photo IDs, they complete the information. And if anybody wants to study the population, we have another, let's say, another piece of the sample, which is the archive. They are intact as they were taken, and they are frozen, keeping their qualities. So if anybody needs to do any further study, like molecular study, biomolecular study, so they just need to go to the archive and take a piece and interpret it.
To deploy the satellite transmitter, the scientist's boat must slip into a group of males, competing for the favors of a female. It's a delicate maneuver.
I
need to be as close as possible, and when I shoot the tag, it's not a matter of just hitting the whale. I could shoot from a long distance and just hit the whale. It has to be in a really very specific spot where the tag goes. So I'm trying to tag very high on the animal. I'm trying to tag just below the dorsal fin and just below the hump. And that's because the tissue there is very dense. So I can track the whale underwater. I see what the animal's doing. I indicate to Oswaldo to speed up, slow down. I can see the whale. You can tell when it's coming up. I get ready. And when I know the whale's going to come up, and preferably when it arches, I'm focused on a perpendicular shot directly in one little spot, and I really, in my head, I see almost nothing else. Oh, that's perfect. It's good, I'm really happy.
The transmitter is attached to the animal's back using a modified line thrower, which shoots the transmitter's anchoring hooks into the whale's flesh without causing too much injury.
Position very high and in very dense tissue, so it will stay in a long time, and it will transmit every surfacing. 11.
That's the tag.
Coming up. Oh, that's perfect. It's good, I'm really happy. I'm happy with today. The tags that we got on were in good positions, and I'm relieved, and I can't wait to start tracking them. I don't want to get to the computer now and see where they go. So this is the 4 whales that we tagged on the 2nd. So this is 4 full days of track for all 4 whales, which is really exciting because the cool thing is that all 4 of these whales were tagged in the same exact group. They were all there together, and then you can see that each one of them has gone a completely different direction. One whale has stayed almost exactly around the same spot that we tagged it. One whale has moved over to Mouchoir Bank, and one whale looks like it's starting its migration up north. And then another whale looks like it's moving to the southeast, which is really unique. And we hope that these keep lasting, because we'll be able to check them every day from here on out. And I check them a lot, so constantly checking my tags and making sure they're all working and see where everybody's going. And
you know, it's very important, this preliminary information, because we have seen that in just 5 days after the tag, the whales are outside of the boundaries of the sanctuary. So for our country, this information is very important in terms of maybe developing new policies for conservation, maybe expanding the boundaries of the sanctuary. You see how important it is for the sanctuary to be included in these areas.
So can we sort of amuse ourselves with the thought of where these guys might be going? And I would say that the Mouchoir Bank guy has a good chance of going to the Gulf of Maine.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a very good guess. I think these other whales, if they move offshore and then start heading north, they have a straight shot to somewhere else. So.
Iceland or maybe even Norway?
Yeah. There are very distinct feeding grounds in the North Atlantic, and they're characterized by high site fidelity, which means that if you go to the Gulf of Maine, you are likely to see whales that you've been seeing for generations. And it's the same with all of the major feeding grounds, Norway, Iceland, Newfoundland, Greenland. And it's all driven by the mother. So the mother will bring her calf there on its first migration. The calf remembers that migratory route and will continue to return there throughout its lifespan. Researchers in all of the feeding grounds have several generations of whales. I mean, we'll see a calf and we'll know its mother and its grandmother and its great-grandmother and its great-great-grandmother, which is awesome, just really, really great. It really shows that these whales are multinational world travelers. They are not Dominican whales, and they're not American whales or Canadian whales. They are whales of the entire North Atlantic. They cross so many different borders across so many different countries. And so we need to all work together to help preserve this species.
While some of the transmitters operated for a limited amount of time, whale number 87765 broke all records by transmitting for 57 consecutive days. The migration data of whale 87765 stopped off the coast of Newfoundland. Where will it go next? Will it remain around Newfoundland, or will it continue its migration towards Iceland, Greenland, or even Norway? The migration data confirms that humpback whales, which do not eat for the entire 4 months of their breeding period, begin to feed again as soon as they arrive in the rich waters of the north. A humpback whale requires 2 tons of food per day. But can the current state of the oceans support any eventual population increase of these species? The composition of the oceans is undergoing a transformation. Their biomass has declined sharply since the start of human exploitation. For whales, seabirds, turtles, sharks, and all migratory species that rely on the oceans, the future is more uncertain than ever.
The food that marine populations need to survive is in decline. Scientists are worried about the growing number of dead zones in the oceans. Off the coast of Bermuda, we met with scientists from the Corvette Kramer, a research vessel studying the composition of the oceans. They recently discovered a new continent of plastic in the Atlantic Ocean.
Sea Education Association essentially is an educational organization that teaches students about the ocean. We do a lot of basic measurements, and the value of those relatively simple measurements is that we go year after year, more or less to the same places. So for instance, our plastic research, where we're doing relatively simple things, each student project is relatively simple, but they build on each other over time.
So what they're going to do now is set up the new stun net, and this is our old standby net. We've been doing it the same way for 30 years. And realistically, it may not be the most efficient way to do it, but we don't want to change what we're doing because we have a long-term database, and so we want to keep doing it the same way every time.
A few years ago, the discovery of a substantial accumulation of plastic in the Pacific Ocean came as a bombshell all over the world. No one suspected the same thing in the Atlantic, where the Sea Education Association has been gathering data for 20 years. But in fact, concentrations of plastic in the Atlantic equal or surpass those observed in the Pacific. And this invisible patch extends into the feeding areas of the ocean's great migrators.
The plastic comes from land. We think that probably around 80% of it is actually shore-based. So it's from you and me. We're trying to do our best. We're trying to recycle, but it's a windy day. A piece of plastic, the yogurt container blows out of the recycle bin, gets in the water system in the river, ends up in the ocean.
I just wanted to show you some of the kinds of things that we find.
This piece is broken, and you can see it's starting to get brittle. It's being weathered by the sun, by just wave action, getting quite brittle into small pieces, easy to break. And we're seeing numbers as high as 250,000 pieces per square kilometer, or even higher. Now granted, most of those pieces are tiny millimeter-sized pieces, but still, it's a big ocean. When you extrapolate that to the size of the ocean and the patches, it's a lot of plastic.
Our plastic garbage ends up in the ocean, where exposure to sun and waves weakens its structure and breaks it into countless tiny pieces that are now inundating the oceans. What is misleadingly called a garbage patch is actually more like a soup of tiny particles, often floating just below the surface.
Did you see some increase of the numbers of pieces of plastic over the 22 years of research?
No, in a lot of variability, but no real increase over that time. So the question is, where is that plastic going? And one idea is, of course, it could be the microbes.
And yet, our society is using more and more plastic. Microbes and bacteria may play an important role in breaking down this plastic, but at what price?
It's hard to say whether it's good news or bad news. Is it good news that it's making plastic go away? There are a lot of additives in plastic, and plastic also acts as a bit of a sponge, absorbing toxic chemicals. So you could ask yourself, is it better for those chemicals to stay in one place in the plastic or to be released into the ocean?
If plastic acts like a sponge, where do all those toxins go? Recent scientific studies in the Pacific Ocean estimate that fish consume between 12 and 24,000 tons of plastic every year.
And it still isn't exactly clear how much these toxins transfer up the food chain from plastic. There has been some work done to show it does happen, but absolutely, we're polluting the ocean, and then it does stay in the food chain, and then we eat the fish.
We produce about 300 million tons of new plastic every year. Half of this, about 150 million tons, is only used once, then thrown away. Worldwide, less than 10% of the plastic we produce is recycled. The development of plastics began in the 20th century. It is estimated that hundreds of millions of tons of plastic have found their way into the oceans in recent decades. Much of this garbage is still floating today. Plastic in the oceans accumulates in specific areas all over the planet, where the major ocean currents concentrate the floating plastic. These immense vortexes, called ocean gyres, draw in and accumulate garbage over wide areas. This pollution ends up in 5 major ocean basins: the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic and Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and the most well-known ocean gyre, the North Pacific. The Midway Atoll, north of the Hawaiian Islands, seems incredibly remote. But for many Pacific seabird species, it is an important refuge and nesting site. The island's most abundant bird is the Laysan albatross, classified a vulnerable species. They come here to lay their eggs and raise their chicks, far from any predators. But the real threat to the Laysan albatross is much more insidious than any predator.
John? Yes? You look at Midway, and it's so remote. It's in the middle of this beautiful Pacific Ocean. And your first thought is it should be pristine, untouched, white sand beaches with nothing on it. But instead we see lots of plastic.
Here, and then just beach disturbance. So it's been a slow.
The winds and the currents of the North Pacific Gyre combine to concentrate plastic in this area. It is not unusual to see the beaches of Midway littered with all sorts of large floating objects, which must continually be collected. But a closer look at the white sand beaches reveals the true catastrophe. Every new wave washes up more tiny particles of plastic and a multitude of garbage that pose a real threat to the island's abundant wildlife. Volunteers come from all over to try and clean up the shores. But the work must be repeated week after week, the result of decades of carelessness and indifference. The same tsunami that hit Japan in 2011 also washed significant amounts of garbage floating in the area onto Midway. The huge wave flooded parts of the island, carrying many large objects far inland. But biologists are more concerned with smaller bits of garbage, transported here not by water, but by air.
The way that plastic is arriving in the interior is that the adult albatross are foraging 1,000 miles or so from here. They're picking up the plastic because they either mistake it for food or food is attached to it. They bring it back here and they regurgitate it to their chicks. And this happens about every 3 days or so this time of year, and the male and female take turns. And they're feeding mainly squid to their chick. You know, it's really difficult to see, but if we look closely, this could be the point where a little bit of plastic is transferring from the adult to the chick.
At some point, some are able to regurgitate a pellet or a bolus and get rid of the plastic, and others don't get rid of it, and as they die, it remains inside their body. This bird is a couple months old, so should we open it up and see if there's plastic inside? Okay, we'll look inside this one and see what we have. And right away we see plastic, yeah. So here's a couple of larger fragments right there, and yeah, so this bit of plastic is definitely part of a larger piece, and some of the plastic might have sharp edges, and they could actually puncture the stomach lining, so that might be a possible cause of mortality for this chick. So it could be the load of plastic plus sharp edges and then contaminants as well that are part of it.
That's probably from a grocery bag or something, you know. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a good chance.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's an interesting piece. We see those occasionally, and we think they're some sort of fishing float, perhaps from Asia, so that's a big item.
Yeah.
Definitely takes up a lot of space. The plastic load in healthy albatross compared to albatross that were found dead, and there was a significant difference, almost twice as much plastic in the birds that died compared to the healthy ones. And so we can't definitively say that plastic kills albatross chicks, but I think what we can say right now is that it is additive to their mortality. Most of the chicks die from dehydration, and so if you think about plastic taking up physical space in the bird's stomach, they have less food, less moisture, and they might be more apt to dehydrate.
Incredible. In 5 or 10 minutes, I collected all this. It's really upsetting. We find a lot of bottle caps and lighters. A lot of lighters. And many floaters like this. They look a lot like what the birds would find. This is a squid without the head. Clearly, they look very much alike. Here's a lighter, and here's a squid. It's not surprising that the albatrosses mix them up.
We see a lot of spacer tubes that are part of the oyster aquaculture industry in Asia or in Japan. So they have these lines that go down, and they have these small little oyster cages. And in order to space them on the line, they have these plastic spacer tubes. And when the line breaks apart, the spacer tubes are all over the ocean. That's pretty common. And I suspect some of the items are so big that they can't regurgitate the pellet. And maybe, again, that's linked back to mortality. If they physically can't get that stuff up, maybe that's another reason why they perish as well. Some of the really surprising things that you find in there, toothbrushes. I mean, you'd think a large toothbrush couldn't be swallowed by an albatross, but it is. Syringes, unfortunately. All sorts of kids' toys are in there, light bulbs, so lots of really interesting things. And if we extrapolate for the entire population, that's about 5 tons of plastic that the adults are feeding to their chicks each year. That's really amazing. Even if we stop putting plastic in the ocean today, it's going to be decades before it's all cleaned up. You know, there's just so much out there. In fact, the gyre where a lot of it concentrates, some people say it's the size of Texas or even twice the size of Texas. So we're talking incredible amounts of items out there and debris.
The age of plastic should have been a revolution for the world. But the invention of nearly indestructible synthetic products has instead become a real menace to the future of the Earth's ecosystems.
Once it goes into the ocean, nobody's figured out the appropriate technique to be able to start to clean up the ocean. We basically have to wait until it reaches land. The best thing that we can do is to make people aware and prevent it from reaching the ocean in the first place.
The solution has to start with us, with our use of plastic, but above all, by how we get rid of our garbage. It's not that complicated. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to recycle our plastic. Some missions are harder than others. Coming here to Midway has been pretty tough. Of course, I expected to see plastic from the oceans, but I never thought I would see so much. I think we have gone too far. The oceans are filled with plastic. Each wave brings more, and there are a lot of waves. It's clear that the presence of humans is felt all over the planet now. And unfortunately, I don't mean that in a good way. Sometimes human nature is pretty hard to understand.
Protecting the ocean's great migrators is still a challenge for scientists. We must take inspiration from our successes to build momentum and create the vital wave of change that will determine the future of our world. Today, the humpback whale is undergoing a population boom all over the planet. In calving areas, like the Dominican Republic, calves are being born in greater numbers, helping to secure the future of this species. The reconciliation between our two species is translating into an apparently shared curiosity. No one who has come face to face with a whale has not come away profoundly moved.
Well, the mother came up kind of unexpectedly too, and I didn't know where to go.
She made a full turn.
It's incredible to see how calm and serene they are. You're not scared. You're not scared at all. These are what I call little moments of eternity. They stick in your head, and they're gonna be there forever. It's an amazing feeling.
It was fantastic. I've never had an experience like that before.
Amazing. Amazing.
Incredible. After an experience like that, you can die happy. Incredible.
We have managed to save most whale species from extinction because people mobilized against whaling. We no longer need whale blubber to produce an oil that was once considered irreplaceable. Citizen mobilization may be the salvation of the oceans if we are going to rescue them from the devastating effects of our own consumption habits.
I'm by nature an optimist. I realize it's a very serious problem and it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I'm an optimist that we can at least stabilize the situation.
Hopefully, over time, we can make some positive change and reduce the amount of plastic that's going in the ocean and reduce the amount that albatross are getting. Because ultimately, it's going to affect you and I and all levels of the food chain. We see the same phenomena. The small fish have plastic in them, the small zooplankton, all these different things. So we need to make a difference.
When industrial whaling ended, there were only about 5,000 humpback whales left. Today, there are over 60,000 in the world's oceans, a great conservation success story. When people mobilize, they can accomplish great things. Today, witnessing the magnificent spectacle of the Earth's last giants is certainly one more motivation to conserve the extraordinary biodiversity of our planet.
Our oceans are facing considerable conservation challenges, but with better science, we are beginning to understand them so we can better protect them. The grand spectacle of life continues in all its stunning beauty, but time is running out if we want to preserve the fragile balance of biodiversity. A biodiversity that allows all forms of life to thrive, including our own.
L'extraordinaire biodiversité de nos océans s'offre en spectacle à chaque plongée. Nous avons la chance, au cours de cette mission, de parcourir la planète pour aller vérifier l'état de cette biodiversité et apprécier toute sa beauté. Mais nous constatons aussi la grande fragilité de l'équilibre entre les espèces. Ce que la nature a mis des millions d'années à peaufiner, à adapter, nous sommes malheureusement en train de le détruire rapidement. Nous avons mis le cap sur l'île Coco, une île rendue célèbre par ses légendes de pirates. On dit que des trésors dérobés aux bateaux espagnols y seraient enfouis quelque part. C'est pourquoi on l'appelle d'ailleurs l'île au trésor. Mais pour les scientifiques, le véritable trésor se trouve probablement dans cette biodiversité marine exceptionnelle. La puissance dans les nageoires d'une tortue verte, c'est vraiment quelque chose de très impressionnant. En fait, les tortues vertes sont d'excellentes nageuses et donc leur anatomie a évolué pour créer une masse musculaire très importante au niveau des articulations, ce qui rend évidemment notre opération de capture plutôt périlleuse. Une fois à bord de l'embarcation pneumatique, la tortue a pu être transportée jusqu'au Sedna IV, où l'attendait toute une équipe de biologistes. Nous avons une sorte d'ascenseur spécial pour les animaux de grande taille, et donc cette tortue a pu être descendue jusqu'à l'atelier du Sedna, où les biologistes l'attendaient pour installer les différents émetteurs. Pour ce voyage à l'île Coco, nous avons invité deux grands spécialistes des tortues, deux sommités qui travaillent régulièrement dans ce secteur du Pacifique. Ces deux biologistes sont devenus activistes par la force des choses, car ils croient véritablement que c'est par l'action concrète, sur le terrain, qu'on peut faire changer les choses.
Oh, let me see. Is there any 4062 there? No. See, now it's only 181.
Verify. Super verify.
One 0 7 4 9 7 4.
Okay. Okay, we hold it
Okay,
here.
so take the measurements and then you do the tagging and I'll tag her. And you can
Okay.
tag her and all.
Yeah.
Okay, so hold her there, Cheapo.
Okay.
Okay, put this right there where the skin starts and the shell ends, or like right there, okay.
74 and a half.
Yeah, 74 and a half, yeah, let's say 74 and a half. And width?
What do you got?
72.
72. This is the first time we've caught this turtle. Hasn't been marked before. We're putting a tag on now, permanent tag. Okay.
Check the lock.
Check. Perfect. PE 312.
Where are you going to do it?
Same place. Wait. Okay, it's locked. PE 313.
This is an acoustic tag, and these are the same tags we use for the sharks. And since we already have a system of listening stations around the island for the sharks, then we use the same system for the turtles. Okay. Okay. We've had turtles with the tag on for over a year, sometimes a few months. And so sometimes it seems like they're pretty permanently in there with cables and everything, but they do fall off.
In the old days of sailors, couldn't keep fresh meat on board for very long, so they would stop at islands like this, grab turtles, put them on their back, and they could last for months. Come down once a week, just pour some water on it to keep it from drying out, and then they could use the meat as they needed. So turtles played a major role in the exploration of the world.
Okay.
The green turtles of the Caribbean that people are more familiar with are purely vegetarians. They eat turtle grass, which is an algae. So they grow very slowly. This satellite transmitter will send a signal up to a satellite up in space, and then that will send the signal to my computer, and I'll know right where this turtle is every day. We're trying to understand what the migration routes are. So when this turtle's here at Cocos Island, it's protected because there's a 12 nautical mile no fishing zone. As soon as it swims out of that, we don't know. It could get caught on a fishing line and be killed. So our goal is to understand where these turtles go and then create marine protected swimways. So if they're swimming to Galapagos, we want to connect their swimways. We want to understand their migration routes and be able to protect them by closing fishing areas. So as you're doing that, we want to try to keep it kind of as hydrodynamic as we can. We've had turtles go as far as Panama. We've had turtles go to Costa Rica. We've had turtles go to Costa Rica and then swim up the shore all the way to El Salvador and then head back out to sea. And a lot of our turtles like it in Cocos and stay right around here.
The juveniles, or the young ones, they definitely stay here for a number of years. For instance, we have turtles that we tagged here 2.5 years ago, and they're still there in Dirty Rock, for instance. So the young turtles live here, and the adults just swing by, and then they take off and continue their migration.
There are different policies to protect turtles, for instance, special hooks, circle hooks, which they're less likely to swallow. But the best way is to protect the ecosystem, protect the habitat that they need to live. So if we can close those areas to fishing, then we'll have turtles for our kids to see and our grandkids.
Après quelques heures de travail, notre invité peut maintenant retourner à la mer. Randall et Todd ont vérifié le bon fonctionnement des émetteurs et cette tortue verte du Pacifique peut maintenant recouvrer sa liberté.
Now we have to be careful with the satellite transmitter. So let's do the right back here. Oh, you got the hook? Okay. Careful with the satellite transmitter. Okay. I'm basically, yes, in love with turtles. Thank you.
Thanks to you. Je pense qu'on peut dire mission accomplie. Les données maintenant qui seront recueillies par cet émetteur satellite vont permettre de mieux connaître les déplacements de cette tortuette et permettront peut-être un jour d'établir des corridors de protection, des zones bien définies où la pêche sera interdite. Mais il faut bien sûr encore beaucoup de campagnes de sensibilisation parce qu'il reste beaucoup de travail à faire avant que ces mesures, pourtant essentielles, se réalisent. Les plages constituent des habitats essentiels pour les tortues marines. Les tortues viennent y pondre leurs œufs depuis des millions d'années et c'est ce qui garantit en quelque sorte la survie des différentes espèces de tortues sur notre planète. Pas de plage, pas de tortues marines, c'est aussi simple que ça. Mais ces plages se sont beaucoup transformées au cours des dernières années depuis qu'une espèce a connu un boom démographique exceptionnel, l'humanité. Non seulement nous utilisons et transformons ces plages pour nos loisirs, mais le développement immobilier réduit sans cesse ces habitats essentiels pour les tortues. C'est intéressant parce qu'une tortue va revenir pondre ses œufs exactement au même endroit là où elle a vu le jour il y a très longtemps. Elle va revenir évidemment quand elle aura atteint sa maturité sexuelle, ce qui peut prendre 15, 20, 30 ou même 40 ans chez certaines espèces. Après toutes ces années, lorsque les tortues reviennent, elles vont plutôt retrouver des plages qui sont souvent peuplées avec des maisons, des lumières qui les désorientent complètement la nuit ou des terrasses d'hôtels aménagées. C'est donc pas facile pour une tortue de venir pondre ses œufs maintenant en toute sécurité.
¿Usted es de aquí? ¿Qué es lo que representa las bolas para usted?
Ay, no sé, algo lindo que yo siento. Algo lindo que a mí me nace y que yo no quisiera que se desapareciera. Yo, digamos, cuando yo me crié chiquilla, yo me recuerdo que mi papá los llevaba a la playa. Decía, vamos a la playa a sacar huevos.
¿Y era normal?
Pero a comer.
¿Era normal?
Sí, para comer, no para negocio.
Era dentro de la cultura.
Sí.
¿Y cómo era la situación en esa época con las baulas?
Ay, no, era algo lindo, porque eran baulas en cantidad. Salían por noche, era una cosa lindísima. Los biólogos decían que eso iba a ir bajando. Cada temporada ellos hablaban eso, pero decía yo, qué mentira, porque hay bastante baula. Y sí lo hizo, sí lo fue. Y que ellos decían que había que cuidarlas porque las baulas se iban a ir.
¿Listos? Vamos. Fueron años difíciles,
para las personas, muy difíciles. No había muchas fuentes de trabajo. Y la gente se dedicaba a la agricultura, ganadería, trabajar en los campos, pesca. Y el dinero que ganaban no era mucho. Entonces había que hacer algo extra para ayudar a la familia, al sustento de las familias. Y un dinero fácil era venir a coger los huevos de las tortugas, ya que eran bien remunerados, bien pagados. Yo fui parte de esa gente. Ponías una estaca, pedazo de madera, de aquí caminabas 50, 100 metros, o si podías más, ponías más lejos. Entonces todas las tortugas que venían en ese pedazo eran tuyas. Antes venían 200, 300, hasta 400 tal vez en una noche. Ahora llegan en este tiempo, en este momento, 1, 2, 3, máximo ha sido 5. Entonces la gente venía, esperaban que estuviera lista, cogían los huevos, sacaban, metían dentro de un saco. El comprahuevo te esperaba en la calle, en la salida, con un carro de cajón. Entonces en una noche podía sacar 100 docenas, 120 docenas, el que se ponía en una parte mejor. Y pagaban a 400 colones, si más no recuerdo, 500 o 600 colones la docena. Entonces, saca la cuenta, 100 docenas a 400. Buen dinero.
On vient de rencontrer 2 policiers et évidemment, j'ai pris le temps de leur demander c'est quoi la réalité policière. Et évidemment, ça ne tentait pas de le faire devant la caméra, mais qu'est-ce qu'ils m'ont dit clairement, c'est qu'il y a des braconniers, surtout dans les secteurs de l'autre côté de la baie, et les gens vendent leurs œufs à travers, la couverture d'Ostinal. Ostinal, c'est un endroit à peu près à 2 heures d'ici, où il y a des arrivadas énormes de tortues, et c'est comme si, lui il me l'avouait, c'est comme si c'était le blanchiment des œufs à Ostinal. Donc le fait que tout le monde dit que les œufs viennent d'Ostinal, donc on peut les vendre. Il me racontait même qu'il y avait des bars où pour $1, on peut avoir une super bière froide avec un magnifique coco, des tortues, avec un peu de tabasco. On boit ça, puis ça a l'air que c'est l'extase. Donc, dans la communauté, il y a encore une relation particulière avec les œufs.
Bueno, esta noche los voy a llevar a una de las playas que yo creo que es más importante para la anidación de tortugas negras en nuestro país, al menos. Se llama Nombre de Jesús. Está a escasos, es una zona boscosa, realmente muy agradable. No hay construcciones en estos momentos y realmente es un sitio muy apto para la anidación de estas especies. Crear y conservar especies que están en peligro de extinción como estas requiere un compromiso de todos. Hay grandes intereses, todos entendemos eso, interés científico, interés de las comunidades, el interés de los desarrolladores, el interés de los pescadores. Sin embargo, es importante lograr ese objetivo común que nos pueda potenciar ese esfuerzo de conservación. Otro de los actores claves importantes que de alguna manera ha ayudado.
Rodney, ¿es el único acceso para ir a la playa?
En realidad por vehículo sí tenemos este único acceso, sin embargo hay una posibilidad de ingresar vía caminando, pero hay que atravesar una montaña que de verdad se complica un poco el acceso.
Está difícil, ¿eh?
Tal vez por el centro de las rocas.
Y por ahí, sí. con una rueda por aquí y el otro por acá.
¿Listo?
Sí.
Perfecto.
Muy bueno.
Nuestro país tiene áreas protegidas y áreas no protegidas, específicamente este sitio que es un área de anidación importante. En estos momentos estamos haciendo todo un esfuerzo de conservación para lograr de alguna manera crear alguna categoría de manejo en esta área y continuar con la protección de esta especie. Bueno, cada noche que llegamos a la playa nuestro grupo se organiza. Una de las cosas que hacemos cuando entramos a la playa es que todo el grupo se reúne y camina toda la playa juntos. La idea es saber cómo está el comportamiento de la situación, si hay gente en playa, no hay, si hay tortugas. Entonces la idea es tener un momento de tranquilidad todos para ver la situación. Una vez que encontremos un rastro, nos detenemos en ese sitio, verificamos qué está haciendo la tortuga e inmediatamente nos ordenamos para trabajar todos juntos.
Y lo que me explicabas que éramos varios por la cuestión de los hueveros que...
La idea es que cuando entramos en grupo es precisamente para que si hay gente que le gusta sacar los huevos, viene un montón de gente que son protectores de tortugas, entonces no es solo una o dos personas, son 3, 4, 5 que están respaldados todos juntos. No, sí, ya vi.
Esas luces en el fondo que
creemos que pueden ser hueveros. Entonces a partir de ahora vamos a manejarnos con más cautela.
Nous avons décidé de profiter de la nuit, nous aussi, pour assister au grand spectacle de la ponte des tortues vertes. Il est plutôt déconseillé de s'aventurer seul sur les plages dans certains secteurs du Costa Rica. Les braconniers sont encore très actifs et nous avons donc décidé d'accompagner l'équipe de biologistes du Parc national de Las Bolas dans leur effort de conservation des sites de ponte. Il faut le dire, dans certains secteurs du Costa Rica, ça joue dur. Depuis quelques années, le trafic de drogue est maintenant associé au trafic des œufs de tortue. Un braconnier peut toucher jusqu'à 300 $ la nuit simplement en revendant ses œufs de tortue sur le marché noir, des œufs qui se détaillent à environ 1 $ l'unité. En 2012, par exemple, un groupe de braconniers lourdement armés s'est introduit dans une crèche, une place où on recueille des œufs de tortue jusqu'à leur maturité. Ces œufs de tortue sont ramassés sur les plages par des bénévoles. Bien, ces bénévoles ont été ligotés et les braconniers se sont emparés de plus de 1500 œufs de tortue. Alors, le message est clair. Les trafiquants, comme les braconniers, ne veulent pas voir de protecteurs de tortues sur leur plage.
Okay, lo que vamos a medir primero es el largo del caparazón y posteriormente el ancho del caparazón. La idea es que usted vaya al otro lado y revise si hay una marca metálica o una identificación. ¿Okay? Y el número de identificación se lo dicta a ella para que ella pueda escribirlo en la hoja. Okay.
LO628.
Listo. Escriba ahí.
¿Cuántos?
Así, sí.
Oh, wow. ¿Qué es lo que voy a hacer? Voy a hacer esto para poderlos ubicar. Ahorita es complicado porque hay muchas raíces.
¿Quieres que lo ayude?
No, no, está ahí. Ah, wow. Que anda hoy en playa. Entonces, hoy vamos a tomar la decisión de remover los huevos o reubicar estos huevos a otro sitio aquí en la misma playa. Entonces, posiblemente vayan a ver cuando los saquemos y los reubiquemos. Okay. Normalmente, si fuese un área protegida, entonces los niños quedan in situ. Entonces tenemos protección del sitio 24 horas. Pero en este momento no tenemos posibilidad de proteger la playa 24 horas. Entonces nos vemos obligados a mover los huevos a otro sitio.
¿Cuántos hay?
Por el momento, 56.
¿Cuánto tiempo? ¿10 minutos más o menos se paran?
Ella puede durar 15 minutos, entre 10 y 15 minutos poniendo huevos.
Ahí sigue poniendo.
Ahí sigue poniendo.
Como las baulas tienen, ella tiene el momento que está poniendo los huevos, tiene un momento de trance, ¿sí? Como las hormonas, como las baulas o es diferente.
Sí, de hecho todas las tortugas entran en un proceso de trance para mover sus músculos y poder empezar a expulsar los huevos.
Okay.
Por esa razón, cuando ella termina, hay que irse porque entonces ya ella empieza a lanzar.
Ah oui, c'est incroyable de voir qu'elle fait tout ce travail, ça fait une demi-heure qu'elle prépare tout, là elle referme tout avec autant d'attention, puis là les œufs sont même pas là. Elle ne sait même pas que ces œufs sont même pas là.
Lo que vamos a hacer es que vamos a reubicar los huevos a un sitio seguro en la misma playa. Nuestros muchachos en estos momentos están haciendo el hueco para ubicarlos en este sitio que consideramos que es bastante seguro.
¿Cuántos metros va a ser esto?
La idea es que la profundidad sea similar a la profundidad del hueco que excavó la tortuga. Entonces estamos hablando de 45 a 50 centímetros. En estos momentos lo que Luis va a hacer es, una vez que ya lleguemos a la profundidad adecuada, vamos a moverlos en el sitio.
Ce qui est fantastique, c'est que pendant des générations, ces jeunes-là auraient normalement appris à devenir braconniers. Là, c'est la nouvelle génération. Et avec le changement de mentalité, tu vois, c'est tout à fait l'inverse. C'est les jeunes qui prennent les choses en main et qui essaient de sauvegarder les tortues. C'est pas mal.
Y posteriormente los vamos a ubicar con una plaquita de aluminio que nos permite a nosotros identificar en los próximos 45 días, que es cuando se da la exhumación de los neonatos. Ahora lo que vamos a hacer es que vamos a echar arena en el nido y Luis lo que va a hacer es que lo va a compactar. Entonces, la idea es compactar lo más que se pueda para que los huevos queden seguros en el sitio. Y posteriormente vamos a marcarlo con respecto al mojón que está allá.
If the poacher find the little stick.
Ahora lo que hacemos es que esta marca la vamos a enterrar, la vamos a poner sobre arena. Entonces la idea es que la marca es simple y sencillamente para que cuando lo encontremos podamos hacer relación de ese nido con esta hoja. Entonces así yo sé exactamente cuál tortuga fue la que puso estos huevos y cómo es el éxito de eclosión de esta tortuga con respecto a este nido y todos sus nidos.
Sobre estos 82, ¿cuántos van a ir al agua?
Los éxitos de eclosión, por ejemplo, la temporada anterior anduvo entre un 80 y un 90%.
C'est formidable de voir l'implication des jeunes bénévoles pour la sauvegarde des tortues. Leur travail sur les plages va permettre de sauver un grand nombre de tortues, certes, mais il va surtout servir au changement des mentalités. Ce changement, il est essentiel puisqu'on veut que la nouvelle génération modifie ses habitudes de consommation et condamne le braconnage. Je pense que cette nouvelle génération sera prête à tout mettre en œuvre pour sauver ces espèces menacées d'extinction.
Quedan muy pocas personas que se dedican al saqueo de huevos.
¿Qué es lo que cambió?
La mentalidad de las personas y el que Tamarindo haya crecido en cuanto a zona turística, porque hay más fuentes de empleo.
¿Y tú qué haces ahora?
Ahora trabajo como guía turístico. Después pasamos a ser promotores turísticos, de los cuales nos enseñaron un poco sobre biología de la tortuga.
La présence des braconniers a diminué sur les plages dans le secteur de Guanacaste, surtout depuis la création du parc national de Las Bolas. Aujourd'hui, les touristes viennent d'un peu partout pour assister au grand spectacle de la ponte des tortues. Mais le braconnage demeure un enjeu important dans certains secteurs du Costa Rica et le trafic illégal des œufs menace encore aujourd'hui la survie des espèces. Il est essentiel de poursuivre le travail d'éducation si nous voulons sauver ces espèces menacées d'extinction.
Entonces el objetivo es precisamente mantener la población que anida en el sitio. Y para mantener la población que anida en el sitio necesitamos que esos huevos se reproduzcan en el sitio. Y creemos que esfuerzos como los que estamos desarrollando en este momento son sumamente importantes si realmente queremos conservar especies tan importantes y hermosas como estas.
¿Cómo lo ve para el futuro?
Yo creo que hay un compromiso de parte nuestra muy fuerte. Estamos convencidos y la esperanza es poder recuperar estas poblaciones. Claro, pero eso ha sido un proceso de mucho tiempo, de educación de niños, de educación de gente y de compromiso. Y creo que el país, Costa Rica, cada vez adquiere más conciencia ambiental, más compromiso, hay más gente involucrada con eso. Y ahora no solo organizaciones, sino que las mismas comunidades se están involucrando en proteger estos recursos. Y lo más importante es que se van empoderando de esto y lo hacen propio. Yo creo que el hecho de que todas las noches trasnochemos o estemos trabajando hasta 6 o 7 horas logrando salvar todo nido es sumamente importante. Yo sé que tal vez este esfuerzo de conservación no lo veamos en el corto plazo y posiblemente nuestra generación no vea sus resultados y que los vayamos a ver en el largo plazo, pero posiblemente sean nuestros hijos y los veamos en los próximos 20 o 30 años y decimos, bueno, aquellos que trabajaron al principio tuvieron la visión y no desmayaron para conservar, ahora tenemos que continuar con...
Bueno, ¿vamos a dormir?
Vamos a dormir.
¿Vamos a dormir?
Vamos.
Por favor.
It's an animal which has a flexible shell because it's not hard bone. It's got little bones with cartilage in between. It's got a leathery shell, that's where it gets its name, a skin like a dolphin on the shell and on the flippers. It has a pink spot on the middle of its head, which is where the pineal gland is. It has some signaling for hormones. The skull's only half as thick there. They can dive a mile deep like a whale, so the shell collapses when they do that, gets compressed. And they only eat jellyfish, so they must be our friend. We don't like jellyfish.
She looks to be about 145 centimeters long, probably around 18 to 20 years of age, and she's finished nesting. She's now in the process of early bearing, but you can see how delicately she's using her hands to pat the sand down and to pack it so that the eggs are in a nice location, and then she will start to camouflage and cover all around here.
When we came here, the number of turtles nesting per year was 1,500. And then it declined exponentially, so by big steps. To the present time, there's about maybe 50 nesting a year. But it's bottomed out the last 3 or 4 years, so we think that we're due for a comeback. The new turtles that we see now are as a result of these students and volunteers who are on this beach for 20 years. And so, yeah, those are our turtles who are coming back.
You have an opportunity to see a dinosaur come out of the ocean and do all these very intricate behaviors. And I don't think there's anybody who ever walks away from this beach after seeing this experience that hasn't been awed.
The first time we came on the beaches here, Frank Palladino had to pay the local poacher for permission to work on a turtle after he took the eggs. Then he was okay if we studied the physiology of the turtle. After the park was founded and we got more involved and Frank taught the people English and we taught them some biology, now those poachers all became guides, ecotourism guides, so they make more money, cleaner. Now at this point their children are the guides.
Right now, this is a national park. There's national park guards. We have very good protection. There's an occasional poacher, which is usually a stranger who's come into town, and a lot of times they're Nicaraguans that come down here to work on construction of homes and so on, and they want to make some quick money so they can catch a bus and go back home and visit their family. But for the most part, the local people are no longer the poachers. As a matter of fact, whereas before they were against the park, it is the local people who are the strongest supporters of the park.
When we first came here, the people used to be poachers. They hated us. They didn't like us in the local village. Now we're friends. Our students are friends with the young people. And I think it made a big difference. So the people see that these turtles are a benefit to them. I think it's very important.
Le travail acharné de Frank Palladino, James Spotilla et des nombreux bénévoles est vraiment inspirant et prouve que les mentalités peuvent être changées. Mais il reste encore beaucoup de travail à faire dans certains secteurs du Costa Rica. En 2013, par exemple, un jeune étudiant en biologie de 26 ans, Hero Mora Sandoval, a été enlevé avec 4 autres patrouilleurs sur une des plages du Costa Rica. Les trafiquants de drogue et les braconniers en ont assez de ces campagnes de sauvegarde des tortues. Ils veulent retrouver leur plage. Ce soir-là, le jeune biologiste a été ligoté, battu, et on l'a retrouvé avec une balle dans la tête. Hero Mora Sandoval est mort simplement pour avoir voulu sauver une espèce menacée d'extinction. Cette histoire tragique a fait le tour du monde et les groupes environnementaux
ont préparé la riposte. Une récompense est maintenant offerte pour trouver les coupables et le gouvernement du Costa Rica a promis une enquête. La sauvegarde des tortues et la protection des plages passent bien souvent par le travail de passionnés, des bénévoles qui viennent d'un peu partout sur la planète pour participer aux efforts de protection des tortues. Malheureusement, l'intimidation et la violence sont souvent les armes des braconniers, et ça, peu importe où on se trouve dans le monde. Il faut continuer de valoriser les efforts de protection, encourager la présence de bénévoles sur les plages et tout mettre en œuvre pour initier les changements de mentalité qui constituent probablement le seul véritable espoir pour demain.